The royal starship Luminar drifted silently through the violet and gold clouds of the Zoria Nebula. Countless stars glittered like distant lanterns, and planets spun slowly in the distance. Inside the ship, corridors glowed with soft light, and the hum of energy filled the air. Princess Lyra of the Viari moved quietly along the polished hallway, her hands lightly brushing the railing. Her skin shimmered faintly in soft blue tones, and her long hair floated slightly, as if catching the energy of the ship itself. She had never married a human before, and now she was bound to Jonathan Hayes, Earth's ambassador to the Zoria system. From the very beginning, Lyra had felt a strange mixture of curiosity and fear. Humans were unpredictable, she had been told. They were bold, direct, and strong in ways the Viari were not. Her people moved with grace, spoke with care, and valued subtlety in every gesture. Humans, she had learned, often spoke without thinking and acted without hesitation. She had admired many humans from afar, reading their reports and stories, but never had she stood so close to one. Now her pulse quickened whenever Jonathan was near. She shivered, though she could not say why. Jonathan noticed her hesitation immediately. He was tall by human standards, with steady shoulders and calm eyes that seemed to observe everything without judgment. Unlike many humans, he did not boast or push his presence onto others. He walked beside Lyra with quiet respect, careful not to startle her, careful to leave room for her to feel safe. Yet, he did not ignore her either. He met her gaze when it felt right, and in his eyes, she sensed something unexpected: patience, understanding, and quiet reassurance. The princess was nervous. She clutched the edges of her robe and shifted her weight from one foot to another. She wanted to speak, to ask questions about the humans and about Jonathan himself, but the words stuck in her throat. She feared she would misstep, that she would offend him without meaning to, or fail to meet the expectations of her people. So she remained silent, walking beside him through the gardens of the Luminar, a place designed to imitate the natural beauty of her homeworld. Alien flora, with translucent petals and glowing veins, stretched toward the light. Water trickled softly over smooth stones, filling the air with a gentle melody. Jonathan glanced around with interest, letting the serenity of the gardens calm him. He reached out to touch a delicate blossom, careful not to harm it, and Lyra watched closely. His movements were careful and deliberate. He did not rush. He did not make sudden noises. And yet there was a quiet strength in his touch, confidence that came not from force, but from understanding. "On Earth," he said softly, "we have a flower called the cherry blossom. It blooms for only a short time each year. We celebrate it because even the briefest beauty is precious." Lyra turned to him, slightly startled. She had expected humans to speak of wars, politics, or technology. She tilted her head, studying him, trying to understand. He smiled gently, but it was not the forced politeness of diplomats she had met before. It was genuine. "Why tell me this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I think you would appreciate it," he said simply. "Sometimes we humans try to see the world the way others do. Maybe it will help you see me better too." The words, simple as they were, touched Lyra more than she expected. She had feared his boldness, his unpredictability. But now she realized that he was patient, willing to show understanding without pressing her. Her shivering eased slightly, replaced with curiosity. They walked in silence for a while, observing the gardens. Lyra's attention kept returning to the way Jonathan moved. His steps were steady. He did not rush. He noticed everything: the curve of a leaf, the shimmer of a petal, the sound of the water. And when he glanced at her, he did so without judgment, as if he truly wanted to understand. Suddenly the ship's alarms rang softly. A flashing message appeared on the central display. A human delegation ship had become caught in a spatial storm near a small black hole. The vessel's systems were failing and the crew was in danger. Jonathan's face grew serious. He moved quickly to the communications console, calling for his team. Lyra watched in amazement. He issued clear, precise instructions, coordinating rescue crews, analyzing the storm's energy fluctuations, and calculating the best trajectory to reach the stranded ship. There was no hesitation, no confusion, only focused determination. Lyra's heart raced. She had read about humans who were courageous, but she had never seen it in action so close. Every decision he made was correct. Every command executed with efficiency. She could feel the tension in her body shift. Her shivering was no longer from fear, but from awe. "We can't stay here waiting," Jonathan said. "We need to move before the storm worsens. I'll pilot the lead shuttle." "I will accompany you," Lyra said quickly, surprising herself. She did not want to be left behind. Perhaps part of her wanted to see him work, to understand the courage that had first unsettled her so deeply. The rescue mission was tense. The spatial storm twisted light and energy around them, making navigation difficult. The Luminar's shields strained against sudden energy surges. Jonathan's hands moved over the controls with precision. He spoke calmly, issuing commands while monitoring each system. Lyra assisted, relaying information about the storm's patterns and the alien signals from the endangered ship. Together, they guided the shuttle through the dangerous currents of space. At one moment, a sudden wave of energy knocked the shuttle off course. Lyra gripped the console, startled, expecting panic from the human pilot, but Jonathan's voice was steady. "Brace yourself. Adjust thrusters now. Steady, steady." The shuttle responded perfectly. The crew of the endangered ship cheered as they were finally brought to safety. When the mission was complete, the two stood on the observation deck of the Luminar. Looking at the rescued humans safely aboard the ship, Lyra could hardly believe what she had witnessed. The human beside her, whom she had feared, had acted with skill, courage, and calm that surpassed even her own people's trained operatives. She turned to him, wanting to speak, to express her admiration, but found words insufficient. Jonathan looked at her, and in that gaze she felt something profound. There was no prideful boasting, no claim of glory, only understanding, patience, and a quiet invitation to trust, to see the world and to see him through the eyes of shared experience rather than fear. For the first time, Lyra understood that her shivering was not a weakness. It had been a response to the unknown, a reaction to someone who challenged her expectations and yet proved himself worthy of respect. She felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling of admiration and curiosity, and perhaps something more, though she could not yet name it. As the stars outside sparkled, Lyra realized that this human, Jonathan Hayes, was unlike any other. He was not simply a foreign being to be tolerated or observed. He was a partner, someone whose courage, empathy, and patience could be trusted. She shivered once more, but now it was different, less of fear, more of awe, and the quiet anticipation of learning the depths of a being she had only begun to understand. The mission had ended, but a new journey was beginning. Lyra would watch, learn, and perhaps find that the human beside her was not just a husband by ceremony, but a companion in the vast, uncharted expanse of the galaxy. She had feared his presence, but now she felt an unexpected connection, a bond forged not by tradition, but by shared trials, mutual respect, and the quiet power of understanding conveyed without words. And as she stood beside Jonathan on the observation deck, looking out at the infinite stars, Lyra felt a small, thrilling certainty. The story of her shivering was far from over. It was only the first chapter of something larger, something that could change not just her life, but perhaps the destiny of two worlds bound together by courage, trust, and the unknown promise of companionship. The Royal Starship Luminor had returned to its normal course after the successful rescue mission. The nebula outside glowed softly, painting the observation deck in gentle shades of violet and gold. Princess Lyra stood near the viewport, her fingers lightly touching the cool glass. The memory of the rescue still lingered in her mind. She could not help but think about Jonathan Hayes, her human husband. Since the mission, she had watched him closely. Every movement, every glance, every word seemed to carry meaning she had not noticed before. He did not speak of his courage, nor did he boast of the success. Instead, he remained calm, steady, and aware of the needs of others. The more she observed him, the more she realized that her initial fear had been misplaced. Jonathan's gaze, his patience, his quiet strength had told a story far more, as powerful than words ever could. The following days were filled with diplomatic duties. The Council of the Zoria system had requested Jonathan and Lyra to attend meetings with representatives of other planets. These meetings were tense. Many alien species regarded humans with skepticism, seeing them as fragile yet unpredictable. Lyra watched as Jonathan navigated the discussions with skill. He listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and offered insights based on careful observation rather than pride. At one point, a delegation of serpentine aliens questioned human technology, claiming that humans were incapable of understanding the complexity of interstellar navigation. Jonathan smiled, not arrogantly, but with calm confidence. He presented a simple solution to their problem, combining human ingenuity with the aliens' own suggestions. The serpentine delegation nodded in respect, impressed not only by the solution, but by Jonathan's willingness to honor their knowledge while contributing his own.
Lyra
felt her admiration grow. She noticed how humans differed from the Viari. While the Viari valued tradition and ritual, humans valued action and problem-solving. Humans learned quickly, adapted to new challenges, and trusted one another in ways her people sometimes did not. And Jonathan embodied all these traits without arrogance. He was strong yet humble, daring yet patient, direct yet understanding. One evening, the ship drifted near a small, unexplored planet. Jonathan suggested a short landing to study the flora and fauna. Lyra accompanied him, curious to see how he would interact with a world unfamiliar to both of them. The planet was lush, with soft green moss covering stones and trees with silver leaves that shimmered in the dim light. Small creatures scuttled among the roots, and the air carried a faint, sweet fragrance. Jonathan stepped carefully, observing the creatures without disturbing them. He knelt beside a patch of moss, examining the way it grew in spirals. "It's amazing," he said softly. "Even in a small patch there is order and yet constant change. Life always adapts."
How?
Lyra watched him and felt her chest tighten. She realized that she had underestimated humans not because they were weak, but because their strength was different from what she had expected. Jonathan's courage was not loud or flashy. It was quiet, patient, and deeply rooted in understanding and respect for life. As they explored the planet, they encountered a small cave. Inside, the walls glowed with natural luminescence, casting soft light over crystalline formations. Jonathan moved carefully, pointing out patterns in the crystals, explaining how different vibrations created unique echoes. Lyra felt herself drawn to him, not only because of his knowledge, but because of the way he shared it. He did not lecture or boast. He simply invited her to see the world through his perspective. In that moment, Lyra understood something profound. Her shivering, which had begun as fear and awe, had transformed. It was no longer a reaction to uncertainty. It was a response to connection, the recognition that Jonathan's gaze, his patience, and his quiet understanding told a story of devotion and partnership. She felt a warmth she had never known, a desire to trust and to share in his perspective. The journey back to the Luminar was quiet. The stars passed slowly, and Lyra found herself reflecting on the days since their marriage. She had feared the unknown in Jonathan, feared that his human traits might overwhelm her or clash with her culture. But now she realized that those same traits were what made him remarkable. His unpredictability was not recklessness. It was creativity. His boldness was not arrogance. It was courage. His directness was not disrespect. It was clarity. As the observation deck came into view, Jonathan turned to her. "You've been quiet," he said gently. "Are you all right?" Lyra met his gaze, and for the first time, she saw him not as a human to be studied, but as a partner, a companion, and perhaps a friend in the truest sense. She felt the shivering that had once marked fear now settle into a calm awareness, a sense of understanding and trust. She nodded. "I am better than all right," she said softly. "I am learning, and I see you." Jonathan smiled, and in that smile, Lyra saw patience, acceptance, and something warmer, an invitation to share not only space and duty, but also the unspoken bond growing between them. She realized that the differences between human and VR were not barriers, but bridges. Each of their strengths complemented the other, creating harmony in a galaxy often filled with suspicion and division. In the weeks that followed, Lyra and Jonathan faced numerous challenges together. They mediated disputes between alien colonies, navigated treacherous spatial anomalies, and coordinated humanitarian missions across star systems. Each experience strengthened Lyra's respect for him and deepened the connection she felt. She no longer shivered with fear. Instead, she found herself anticipating his insights, valuing his courage and appreciating the depth of his patience one night. As the Luminor sailed silently through a field of asteroid fragments, Lyra joined Jonathan on the observation deck. The stars reflected in their eyes, and the quiet hum of the ship filled the space around them. She reached for his hand, feeling the warmth and steadiness of his grasp. He did not speak, yet his gaze told her everything she needed to know: trust, respect, and the willingness to face the unknown together. "I understand now," Lyra said softly. "I understand that your strength is not in what I feared, but in what I could not see at first. Your courage, your patience. It teaches me more than I imagined." Jonathan's gaze held hers, calm and unwavering. In that silent exchange, Lyra felt the shivering of uncertainty disappear completely. It was replaced with a steady awareness of partnership and shared purpose. She realized that trust and understanding could bridge even the greatest differences between species. That courage and patience could unite hearts across galaxies. And that her human husband was more remarkable than any story she had ever read, as they stood together, the stars stretching endlessly before them. Lyra felt a quiet joy. The story of her shivering had transformed. It was no longer about fear or doubt, but about discovery, trust, and the beginning of a bond that could withstand the challenges of space, duty, and the unknown. In that moment, she knew one thing with certainty: the human beside her was not simply a husband assigned by duty. He was a companion, a teacher, and perhaps the closest thing to a true equal she had ever known. And together, they could face the stars. Ready to navigate whatever the galaxy might send their way, the Luminar continued its journey, the nebula swirling outside, the stars glimmering, and within the ship, two beings different yet united stood side by side, ready to write the next chapter of their shared story. Lyra no longer shivered in fear. She stood with quiet strength, her heart open, her gaze steady, and her spirit ready to embrace the future alongside her human husband, whose eyes had already told her the most important story of all. The universe was vast, filled with challenges and wonders, but Lyra and Jonathan faced it together. She had feared him once, and she had shivered at his presence. Now she had learned to see him fully, to trust, and to believe in the extraordinary power of connection, courage, and understanding. And in that trust, she found a strength that could rival the stars themselves.